The FutureSox podcast. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am here today joined by Eric Adler. I'm super excited to have you on, Eric. We're looking forward to just talking some baseball and hearing about everything that's going on with you this season.
Glad to be here.
Appreciate it, man. So for those listening, Eric was a 2022 sixth-round pick by the White Sox. Last year, spent the majority of the year between Kannapolis and Winston, opened this season in Winston-Salem, and then recently made his way to Birmingham. On the year so far, super impressive numbers from you last year and then going into this year. Through 14 games this season, Eric has a 1.17 ERA across 15 and a third innings, 24 strikeouts. Really just been excellent so far. First of all, before we dive into kind of just your background a little bit and everything you've gone through the last 2 years, how are you feeling right now, Eric? And how has it been kind of joining this Birmingham team recently?
I feel great. When I got to Birmingham, it kind of was a breath of fresh air in regard to, it felt a little bit more professional. Every level you get up there, it kind of feels a little bit closer to Chicago. So it kind of motivated me to work even harder than I was before. So it's a great group of guys. So we all want to win, and we all striving to the same goal. So it's awesome.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I know there's a lot of excitement right now in Birmingham in general, and you're one of many guys who made their way there recently, and now it's just you're adding more and more talent to the fold, which is only going to make things more exciting. Going back a little to kind of your lead up to this year, you went to Wake Forest, then were drafted by the White Sox. Kind of came in 2022, had a few appearances here and there in 2022, but mostly really got fully rolling last year on the professional level. What was your experience like at Wake Forest and going through the draft and being drafted by the White Sox that kind of helped you build to where you are today?
Wake was a perfect school to go to pitching wise. I'm sure you've heard of the pitching lab and all that stuff. So being around that and being exposed to that throughout my college career was pretty special. It really taught me how to pitch and use my body efficiently. So having that background and having that insight to all the mechanical flaws that I had earlier in my career, it kind of helped shaped, my movement patterns. And then when I realized that this is what I need to do to perform at my best capability, it just makes things simpler down the road, just knowing what to do,
Yeah.
and just working hard at that and letting it translate on the field.
Definitely. What about the element of kind of, the competition level, right? Like everybody has a different background, right? It's fun talking to different players and hearing kind of what their level of competition prior to being in the White Sox system kind of did for them, right? So what do you think facing, the top college players around the country did for you coming into pro ball?
Yeah, I mean, you're playing a lot of great players. You're in the ACC. I mean, a lot of the guys are ACC, SEC, Big Ten, don't matter. You got to be ready for it. If you don't prepare and you're not, or if you think you've made it, you're just going to get chewed up and spit out. And that obviously translates to the minor leagues because you're playing way more games with much better talent. So I'm blessed to have played in the ACC, such great players on my team and on the opposing team. But yeah, it played against a bunch of special guys that, summer ball and college baseball kind of prepared me for where I'm at.
Definitely. When you come in, a lot of guys, right, drafted, especially with the draft pedigree you were drafted with, come in as starters and then will eventually transition to a reliever, right? You came in kind of as a relief pitcher, right? Like it was always, you started the season in 2023 in a bullpen role. You were getting saves already at the lower levels of the minor leagues, and now it's kind of translated over the last year and a half. What is the mentality like knowing you're going to be a relief pitcher, and how does that what is your daily life like with that mindset of going in any given day?
Honestly, I love it. Not everybody wants to be a relief pitcher. They kind of have that mindset of I want to be a starter only. I want to do this, and this, or whatever. But the biggest thing with being a relief pitcher is understanding that you have a job to do and you need to be consistent as possible doing that job. So kind of throwing your feelings out of the door. When you go in there, you get your 3 outs, you get your 6 outs, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I find that really fun because sometimes you just don't feel good at all, but you can still perform better than if you were feeling great one day. It's kind of like a game with yourself because you're getting up and down so many times. Um, and on a daily basis, like staying in that middle ground, not getting too high or too low, with your past outings. It's a tug of war because you want to follow your emotions, but being able to control that and stay even keeled on the mound is essential.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's cool to hear that you enjoy that role, right? Because like you said, like there's a lot of guys that come into professional ball and all they want is to be a starter, and that's not a bad thing, right? But being in that role and enjoying the role you're in is a great asset going forward. Coming into this offseason, right? Last year you spent the season kind of half Canny, half Winston, right? I thought you might have even gone straight to Birmingham this year, but you start with Winston. But going into the offseason, what were kind of some of your goals building off of a first full season last year?
Really to hammer down my fastball usage. So being able to set up hitters with my fastball, essentially meaning like becoming as accurate as possible with my fastball. And on top of that, like, working on my back leg efficiency and getting down the mound and just some mechanical changes that will make my delivery just a little bit more efficient and powerful. Um, but I also was working on a splitter for a little while, but that pitch is kind of hard to throw, so I kind
Yeah,
of grabbed it. Um, but yeah, I didn't want to really change too much with the arsenal per se. I was happy with where I finished up last year. Um, but yeah,
yeah.
nothing crazy.
Got you. I've noticed a lot of your fastballs. You really have this season, at least. You've worked the fastball high a lot, especially on miss counts, strikeout counts. You definitely work both corners of the upper part of the zone. Is there anything else with either your curveball or your cutter that you've worked on, kind of putting those in specific locations, or is it more just still building that fastball command, like you mentioned?
Um, with the cutter, I'm trying to work backdoor a lot to lefties
Yeah.
because they'll see hard out of the hand and then it'll just kind of clip the zone.
Right.
Typically should be a free strike every time. And I honestly like back footing lefties with the cutter, but it is kind of a risky game, so to speak, because some lefties have that longer golf club swing, and if you leave it just a little out of the zone, they'll see the hump early and probably will hit a hard
Right.
baseball somewhere. But with the curveball, I spiked it, so I was like this with
Yeah.
it, and I just went there,
A little more than knuckle curve style.
knuckle curve,
Yeah.
and it spiked the movement a lot, and the RPMs up. So I'm not sure how that correlates with doing this,
Yeah.
but it's made it much more efficient and a much better pitch. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to work with that.
Yeah, it looks sharp. Have you tried to? I think I've noticed this a few times. Do you find yourself working any curveballs, kind of early count curveballs, to get some early strikes? Is that something you work on at all?
I try to. I'm just starting to get the feel for it to where I can
Yeah.
kind of command it. Started throwing it in Winston like 5 outings in, I believe, um, and it's kind of evolved a little bit. I was throwing it 36 feet, whatever, but now that I'm kind of more comfortable with it, yeah,
Yeah.
like to a righty or something, just dump it in because that's not
Right.
their approach. They're trying to see
Exactly.
fastball or slider or
Yeah.
cutter. Um, and if I just dump that in there, it should be a free strike.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you noticed now that you've pitched what I think 6 games now with Birmingham since you got called up? Have you noticed a difference in some of the hitters you're facing, and is there anything that you've really had to adjust in these games with Birmingham as opposed to being in Winston?
Yeah, for sure. When I first got here, I didn't have the best outing. Um, and I just noticed that their approaches were a little better, and they wouldn't chase as much on, say, the out of zone slider or the back foot slider. Um, and if you're getting behind, like, you're going to be in trouble, you
Yeah.
know. Whereas in Winston, you can kind of get away with just like your pure stuff. Double A, you actually got to, pitch
Right.
more, and work on that skill versus just throwing your stuff and
Yeah, I think that's what I've heard from almost
here it
every
is.
guy. I think I've heard that from almost every guy that I've talked to. That's when you get to double A, especially the Southern League, especially is kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that jump of like going from being able to just get by with you being talented and having stuff and then just having to pitch more effectively at that level compared to the prior one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can you tell me a little bit about kind of some of this? So right now, like I know you know this, right? Like the Birmingham pitching staff from top to bottom, whether it's rotation, bullpen, everything has been like one of the best in all of minor league baseball this season. It's just been, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many guys from the entire roster that are just dominating. What is it like being around those guys? And can you tell me a little bit about just kind of how you feel about this pitching depth in Birmingham right now?
I mean, it's very fun. Everybody works very hard and everybody is driven and everybody wants to get to the next step, but we're a team and we piggyback off each other perfectly. Um, you know, Shout out to the bullpen guys. Last week, I don't think we gave up a run, but we did
Yeah,
it pretty quietly. It's
nice.
not the most glorious job being a reliever, but
Yeah, it's important.
we've been doing our job, and our starters they're awesome to come in after because you watch them for 6 or 7 innings, get everything they got, and it just kind of makes us do the same. So it's been very fun with this team
Yeah.
so far. I can imagine how it'll be later on down the season. So.
Definitely. Is there anybody that, obviously there's some huge name prospects on that roster. Is there anybody that, is a little bit more under the radar, whether it's some of those pen guys that you really have been able to see them up close and see some of their stuff just work and be impressed by them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say everybody in the pen. We don't really have like, you know, an odd man out.
Yeah.
Everybody's unique in their own way and everybody works with their arsenal just fine and performs very well on the field.
Yeah, that's great.
Um, I would say Addison Coffey's composure on the mound is something I respect. I try to stay as composed as possible and kind of emotionless on the mound, and he's similar in that regard. So I would tip the cap to him
Nice.
for that.
Yeah, that's cool. So you played with, this is a guy that I talked to this past offseason a little bit. You played with Seth Keener a little bit in school, and I know you're buddies with him. Can you tell us a little bit about,
Mm-hmm.
this is his first season, right? He's getting adjusted. He's kind of working that transition from a reliever to a starter. Can you just share some insight on your thoughts on Keener? Obviously, you played with him, you're friends with him, right?
Mm-hmm. Keener's a awesome athlete. Like, you could put him in any scenario and he'll do well. He's got the stuff. I played catch with him for 3 years. His arsenal is there. He's just going to get adjusted, and then once he does, he's going to perform to the best of his ability, and he should climb through the ranks. He's that kind of guy, and he's very smart, so he knows how to get to where he wants to go. Um, but yeah, he's
Yeah.
talented, and I'm excited for the future with him for
Yeah,
sure.
no disrespect to anybody else I've talked to, but Seth is probably the most cerebral dude I feel like I've interviewed over time with the
Yeah.
Sox. He's got some
Yep.
serious stuff, like thoughts in his head, and I love it. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of when you were in spring training this year, right? So this is your second spring training with the team, but this was, was there anybody with the big league team that kind of stood out to you, or was there just any sort of energy that you really felt this spring?
Um, I would say Garrett Crochet. I spent some time with
Yeah,
him this past year at spring training and the year before that when I was doing a little bit of rehab. And he's just a great dude,
yeah,
super nice guy, and like makes you feel a part of the team. You're in minors, you're still like in the White Sox organization, and obviously he's Garrett Crochet, so he doesn't
right.
need to do that, but he would call me by my first name, call other guys by their first name, be personable. He's, I mean, that kind of caught me off guard at first. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, all right. Like, didn't expect that, but it definitely, is motivating actually
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have a big leaguer, he's personable with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And on top of that, right, like he's pitching unbelievable lately, and it's just going
Mm-hmm.
from a reliever to a starter is super impressive.
Yep.
We'll wrap here. In terms of outside of baseball, is there anything that you really enjoy doing, or things you just like to do to keep your mind kind of balanced throughout the season or off season?
Golf. I mean,
That's a
I
common answer.
absolutely, yeah, I feel like everybody golfs
Yeah,
nowadays. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. I can't
yeah.
really,
Golf and baseball sounds like a good life.
yeah, right.
Can't complain. Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us a little, Eric, and we're excited to keep watching you in Birmingham and throughout the rest of your season.
Of course, man. Thank you.
Thank you.